Well, good evening, everybody. And first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me come out here and give a presentation. This is actually the first time I've ever done something in a group like this. Usually it's like really, really big crowds where I feel like I'm alone or I am alone. So anyways, so thank you for having me out here. Like she introduced, I have 15 years of law enforcement experience. I am from Fremont County. I live in Fremont County, but I work out of Colorado Springs, and I'm from Colorado, Colorado native. So obviously everything that goes on in this state, in this community is very important to me. I'm also a mother, so I have a passion for protecting children. And this is something that I wouldn't say I necessarily fell into, but when I came on as an HSI agent, I absolutely did not expect that this would be the path that I would start taking. And although I do work a lot of different cases, a lot of different types of cases, this is the one where my passion kind of takes over. So we'll get started. Obviously, I am part of the Stop Trafficking outreach program, part of Blue Lightning campaign. So what that is it's we go out and we educate and we try to give presentations to business, communities, schools, airports. We just did an aviation awareness outreach program September, October of last year, which was really revealing to me just to go and give presentations to pilots and airline attendants and stuff, because when you're thinking about human trafficking, you're wondering how are they getting from A to B? They're flying, they're driving, they're on buses. So giving that presentation to them was very eye-opening for all of us, I think. So let's get started. First of all, we'll talk about what our objectives are as HSI. So Homeland Security Investigations, we're the investigative arm for the Department of Homeland Security. We have criminal investigative authorities as well as arrest authorities and all those types of things. This is what we do as it relates to trafficking. We like to prevent, protect, prosecute, and partner to define what human trafficking is and what it's not, and to understand how traffickers exploit their victims or individuals, okay? Identify the indicators of human trafficking and learn how to recognize, report, and respond. So obviously HSI is a critical asset in the ICE mission. We do all the investigations on domestic and international activities arising from illegal movements of people and goods within and outside of the United States of America. So we're not just domestic, we have offices all over the world, which I'll show you as we go through. Our vision statement is to secure the homeland from transnational crime threats, and we do consider human trafficking a transnational crime threat. So we investigate, disrupt, and dismantle terrorist, transnational, and other criminal organizations that threaten or seek to exploit the customs and immigration laws of the United States. So these are our areas of expertise, some of the things that we do: border security, homeland security, public safety, public health, global trade, economy, stuff, and technologies. We oversee all of these areas, and we do investigations through all of these different areas. This is our international map where we have offices throughout the world, where we work with attachés, where we have connections, where we travel. We do a lot of international tours where we go out and work with some of our international partners to investigate human trafficking, as well as another wide variety of international crime. This is our domestic offices here in the United States, where we're located and how our offices are broke up. Although we are Denver HSI area of operation, we work with all of the offices, so we're not stuck here to Colorado. I've worked in Texas, I've worked in California, Arizona, so we go all over the place. We're not bound by state lines. All right, so we are a leader in combating transnational criminal organizations engaged in human trafficking. We use all of our resources and all of our authorities to disrupt and dismantle the criminal infrastructure engaged in human trafficking. So obviously that's our primary mission, is to dismantle these organizations. So it's a lot of times easier said than done, but our goal is to break down the organization that is committing the human trafficking. So cross-border human trafficking organizations, those are the people that are bringing people in and out of our country for the sake of human trafficking. And what we have began doing as an agency is working a victim-centered approach, where we're more worried about placing the identification and helping victims and giving resources and going after the traffickers, not the victims. Here's our latest fiscal year 2022 statistics. When you look at the investigations, the arrests, the convictions, and the individuals who we've assisted or identified, these look like really big numbers, but this is the ones that we know about. These are the ones that we have been reported to or we've come across through our investigations. This is not, obviously you could figure this is probably double or quadruple what's actually taking place out there that we don't know about. So HSI numbers, so that will be national numbers. So that's actually, I mean, those are great numbers, but they're not when you look at the impact of this. So this is just what we get notified of. So obviously we have work to do. So this is just some of the industries where there's labor trafficking. So labor trafficking and sex trafficking, they're two different things, but they do fall under human trafficking, and we'll get more into that as we go through. So obviously labor trafficking is when they're recruited, harbored, transported, or obtained for labor and services through force, fear, or coercion, or fraud. That's your businesses, that's your cheap labor, your things like that, where they're being extorted for working. Whereas sex trafficking is where they're doing a commercial sex act by the same means. It has to be force, fraud, or coercion. And if it's under the age of 18, it's always sex trafficking. So that's just something that we want to point out. So if they're under the age of 18 years old, they cannot consent to doing a commercial act or sex act. Just a little bit of information. Again, force, fraud, or coercion, involuntary, or if there's a minor. So it's always sex trafficking if there's a commercial act involving a minor. Then there's sex work. If this is above the age of 18, they're choosing to do this. It's between consenting adults. We do not consider that to be a sex traffic victim. Again, you can self-explanatory. All right, so trafficking, it's involuntary, it's a crime against a person, it's exploitation based. There does not have to be a border crossing. This is where a lot of times people get, lost, is that there has to be, that we have to bring people in from other countries for it to be sex trafficking. That's absolutely not true. They can start here, it can end here, it can happen here. So there's no border crossing that's required there. And they don't have to be a foreign national or a citizen. I mean, it could be a US citizen. So smuggling, this is where these two things kind of get confused a lot of times. Smuggling is where the person is voluntarily maybe getting with a smuggling organization to come into the United States, but it's voluntary. Nobody's snatching them off the streets and throwing them in a car. This is their choice. It's a crime against the state. It's transportation based. There is a border crossing required, and they do have to be a foreign national. This is where we come in and the two become one. It's lucrative, it's illicit, and it's usually ran by organized crime networks. Obviously, we know what force, fraud, coercion, there's just some definitions of what that means. False promises, withholding wages, threats of harm or deportation, debt bondage, psychological manipulation, the keeping of their documents, drug dependency, alcohol dependency, and obviously physical and sexual assault and confinement. This is our strategy. We try to prevent, protect, and then we try to prosecute. And tonight, I'm hoping that we build a lot more of the partnerships. So I think that it's very, very important for us to partner with our other agencies and with our NGOs, because there's only so much as a law enforcement agency that we can do when it comes to providing resources. Obviously, what does victim-centered mean? It means that we recognize the victim's role as a witness. We focus on vindicating their individual rights, empowering the victim as an active participant, minimizing re-traumatization, and facilitating transportation of vulnerable victim to an empowered survivor. Trauma-informed, that means that we try to understand their physical, social, and emotional impact of the trauma on that person. Obviously, if you haven't been trafficked, you can sympathize, but you don't understand it. But we do try to definitely, take into account what they've been through without re-victimizing them, without, re-traumatizing them. So we do have victim assistance specialists within our agency. Right now we have, ours are in Denver, but they do come down quite often and they assist us anytime that we have a victim who needs help or who wants to speak with somebody. They provide interviews and resources. We do try to team up with our NGO partners. We never interview at the trafficking site ever. We're never going to sit them down in that place and time and start interviewing them. That's just not the way that we work. We utilize forensic interview specialists. Those are for people who are under the age of 18, who will be with a forensic interviewer if that is necessary. And we take the time to build rapport. And a lot of times we do have to keep coming back to talk to these individuals before they're willing to open up and speak with us. At the time of rescue, this is post-recovery interviews. So those are two completely separate types of interviews. And deciding who needs to be present. So we're obviously not going to try to overwhelm that individual with a bunch of law enforcement people. We try to keep it, confined to either an advocate or a victim assistant or a victim witness person or a survivor. So we do have multi-jurisdictional investigations. We work with feds, state, local, tribal, foreign law enforcement. And we do try to partner with a lot of our overseas areas to combat some of this. This is just a whole lot of acronyms that nobody really needs to know other than us probably. But we do, this is what, I'm not sure how common this is still John's, but that's kind of what they refer to as the individuals who are purchasing these sex acts. And these are some of the tools that we can use as a law enforcement to get some of our information or to identify victims. I'm sure most of you are very familiar with NCMEC, the National Center for Missing Persons. We work with them a lot. They give us a ton of leads and tips through the cyber world, where they get reports where people look like they may be being trafficked or like it may be a minor. So we work with them quite a bit. All right, so this is something that I think is like very important to put out there for awareness, is that traffickers and victims can be any age, race, ethnicity, sex, gender identity, nationality, any immigration status or cultural background, social economic class, and at any education level. So this is what makes it really, really hard for us to identify trafficking victims and traffickers, is because they don't wear a tag. They're not walking around with the I traffic somebody sign or anything like that. They blend in. They're in all communities, all towns, cities, states, and all over the world. So it's very, very hard for us to identify these individuals. Obviously, legitimate, illegitimate industries, and they oftentimes commingle with other criminal activities. So a lot of the investigations that we run into is not, we don't go out initially for human trafficking. That's not what we're called for. We may show up for something completely different, and then we, come across this is something that's happening within that other criminal activity. This is a big thing associated with relatives, families, friends, gangs, transnational criminal organizations. We think most of the time, or at least I know I did, had the misconception that these were people that were getting taken by these organizations off the street or somewhere. And what we find out more often than not is this is a family member or a friend who is the trafficker of these individuals. And I don't know that it makes it easier to think that it's somebody that we don't know, but more often than not, it's somebody that we do know. So that's something that I like to press upon people, is that a lot of times this is somebody that we have a relationship with, and oftentimes a very close relationship with. So they can be alone or they can be in groups. So the United States is a source, transit, and destination country for men, women, transgender individuals, and children, both U.S. citizens and foreign nationals, that can be subjected to sex trafficking and forced labor. They use various forms of force, fraud, and coercion to control and exploit victims, including debt bondage, fraudulent employment opportunities, false promises, violence, and threats of violence. Some of the examples that I think of is the modeling industries, the acting industries, where they're promising somebody to come in and be the next Cindy Crawford or something like that. And then these hopeful individuals come in, and the next thing they know, they think that they're going to be an actress or an actor, and they're now a trafficked victim. Here's some of the areas where they find this to be somewhat prevalent. Obviously, this doesn't cover everything. It's just some of the, industries that we've come across where we found this to be prevalent, which some of this isn't really surprising, but some of it is, or at least it was for me. Okay, indicators. This is the most common question that I think we get as law enforcement, is what are some of the indicators? Like, how do I know if somebody's being trafficked? How do I identify this person? Well, if they're under the age of 18 and they are providing a commercial sex act in any industry and somebody is controlling them, that is an indicator. They don't have a consent to do that. They're not able to consent to that. They're not free to leave or come and go from their employment or from their home. They work excessively long or unusual hours, been threatened with deportation or by law enforcement action, unpaid or paid very little, not allowed to take breaks. They suffer under unusual restrictions at work. They owe a debt, so they owe their trafficker money, so they're having to work off to pay that fee, even if it's a smuggling fee that they are told that they have to pay back through work. They were recruited through false promises concerning the nature and conditions of his or her work. High security measures exist in the work or living conditions. That means like the windows are boarded up, they're covered up, they're hidden, they're behind cameras, bars, there's security where they have to come in and out. Obviously, physical health, so physical or social, sexual abuse or physical restraint. Misconception, most of the time they're not walking around in handcuffs and chains. That's not something that the traffickers like to put out there, but they are being controlled through some way. They appear harmed, malnourished, or deprived of water, sleep, or medical care, or other life necessities, and you have few or no personal possessions. Lack of control, again, few or no personal possessions, not in control of your own finances, not in control of your own ID documents. That could be if they are in the country, they have a passport or a visa, then they don't have possession of those things. Not allowed to speak for themselves. Usually another party will speak for them or on their behalf. If they're fearful, anxious, depressed, submissive, tense, nervous, I mean, that could be anybody, but I mean, overly anxious, I guess. Exhibit unusual, fearful, or anxious behavior if somebody brings up law enforcement, if they get incredibly tense or nervous about that. They avoid eye contact, not freely able to communicate with friends or family, not allowed to socialize, doesn't have the freedom of movement, has been threatened if they try to escape or leave, claims of just visiting and inability to clarify where they're staying or what their home address is or phone number or anything like that. They don't really know where they are or what the sense of time is, or even seasons. Sometimes we've worked with traffickers who will be like, well, I think it was around Halloween when this was happening, because I remember people wearing costumes. I mean, like, they don't even know what month it is sometimes. Numerous inconsistencies in their story, so they're constantly changing their stories. very controlling, doesn't allow anyone near the victim. This is the traffickers, potential traffickers. They speak on behalf of their victims and they don't allow them to speak for themselves. They use alcohol or drug consumption and over medicate victims, invokes right of victims without their knowledge, abuses them emotionally, physically, or sexually, confiscates their identification or money, and isolates them from friends or family. I think this one is kind of the one that stands out to me, is that when you have somebody who always checks in or calls home or was very social and had a lot of friends, and all of a sudden they're isolating and they got a new boyfriend or they met a new friend or something and now they're isolating. I think that's kind of like one of the bigger triggers that I've seen. Okay, so this is a video, so I am going to go ahead and give like a little bit of a heads up here if you have triggers, I guess. This is a person who is sharing their story, so although she doesn't get super graphic, it is a little emotional, so I just want to give anybody a warning if you don't want to see this. Here's your heads up.
At first it was just supposed to be like, oh, this is what we were doing to make money, because he wasn't making enough money to pay for his child support and everything. And after he started to like make me do it every night and stuff, I started to realize, but in my head, I drink, I do whatever drugs he had just to like clear my mind so I wouldn't think about it, because at the time I felt like he was perfect to me. You know, he was there and he'd tell me like, hey, you know, your mom doesn't love you, no one loves you because they're not looking for you and they don't care where you sleep, and like, you live with me and I take care of you. What are you gonna do without me? Because you can't get an apartment on your own, you can't get a hotel. It was basically like I needed him, and like I said, I felt that I loved him. Physically, I didn't really feel anything, but emotionally, it took a toll on me. Like I didn't feel like I was a person. I felt really bad. There was nights I couldn't sleep. There's times I thought about killing myself. I just thought about like the type of person I was, what people would think about me if they knew what I was doing, what my mom would say, just stuff like that. My initial feeling after it was over was sort of a relief, but it was very painful. I felt a lot of pain. I didn't know who to trust, and I was just waiting for him to come back. I was thinking in my head, like, he's gonna come back, you know, nothing's gonna happen. And then after, like, we got to the place and they started to interview me, it's like I felt like I just had to let it all out. Like, you just have to vent to someone and just tell them everything. I feel like people think that they deserve it because you fall in love with someone and they make you feel that way. They make you feel less of a woman, less of a person, less of everything when you've done so much that you know is ungodly, and you keep hearing those words repeated in your head, you're not nothing, no one will love you like I love you. You start to believe it and you start to become that person, and they take control over you. So you feel like you deserve it because they tell you. And I know for me I felt like that because, like I said, I wasn't around my mom, I wasn't around my family, and I didn't grow up in a home where this would be something that's acceptable. When I first went home, you know, I heard people talking under their breath saying prostitute and calling me dirty, and, you know, that just, it makes it all so real that it was your fault. You know, my family didn't see it as, oh, she's a victim. People see it like that. And so you really start to believe it, that it was your fault. I think to prevent trafficking, the main thing law enforcement can do is just be aware of the signs of when they see it, to help girls before they get to the point when they feel like he's everything to them. Because I know if someone would have talked to me before, when he first started to make me do it, when I thought it was wrong, it would have prevented a lot. It would have helped if someone would have noticed the signs. A lot of cops, they'll treat you like you're just a prostitute. They don't talk to you like you're a person. They don't realize that you're a victim. And if law enforcement, they take it into consideration that you are a person, that no matter how many men you've slept with or what you're out here doing, that there's a reason, and that it's not what you chose.
So that's the end of the videos, just some little snippets from one victim who was interviewed with us. And I like the end there, how she talks about being treated like a person, not being treated like a prostitute, or like that was their choice. So that's my firm belief when interviewing people or when working with people, is treating everybody like a person, despite what they may have gone through or dealt with in the past. So again, some of our countering human trafficking, some of the things that we have, some of the things that we offer, some of the things that we do, and some of the different entities that are involved with the Department of Homeland Security. So this here is all of our different agencies that fall under DHS, and we try to work with each and every one of them to provide resources and to identify individuals as well as targeters, or traffickers, I apologize. Center for Countering Human Trafficking. This is the group that I work with, the Stop Trafficking group, to try to identify victims and provide resources. So again, a bunch of services and individuals that we work with. This is our mission: to serve the forefront of DHS's unified global efforts to counter human trafficking, including both sex trafficking and forced labor, through innovative law enforcement programs, education, and victim advocacy. This is kind of where we fall. This is our Blue campaign. We have it in like a bunch of different languages. We provide, we actually have Mike Kamal out of Washington, D.C. He goes around and gives presentations for Blue campaign all over the place, where he tries to get this information out to individuals, to schools, and businesses. These are some of the things that we provide as far as resources. Continued presence, which is a temporary immigration designation, which helps people stay into this country. So when there's that fear of deportation, we actually look to try to help them to stay in this country if they have been determined to be a trafficked person. And this is what it has to be for investigation and prosecution. It has to meet these different statutes. It's only good for 2 years. It is renewable. It will include a work permit, and it leads to the victim survivor services and benefits. So here's our reporting and resources, how you can report this to our office, to CCHT. This is our tip line. This is the ones that we get when these tips come in. This is the one that we respond to. All of these will get to somebody, and they obviously have the trafficking hotline. If they identify in our area, then our sector calls us and says, hey, we have a tip, and this is where it is and what it is. And then we triage those tips at that time, and we try to validate that claim. Okay. Questions? Yes, ma'am.
So I'm in the come and go, and I see something like, I don't know, maybe a woman who's, kind of described as what you were saying. Some things, no eye contact, somebody kind of following her along. And I think in my gut or whatever, I think that that's a possibility of something. What do I do next?
Okay, so the one thing I'll tell you, not to do is to approach the trafficker. If you see somebody controlling somebody, don't go up or start asking that individual questions in front of who you think might be the trafficker. Or they may look like they're alone, but let me tell you, a lot of times the trafficker is not far away, or they've got other individuals who are watching these. So please, if general casual conversation, you will be normal and be like, hey, how you doing today? You doing all right? As you're trying to like observe and get more information, the best thing you can do is just information gather. And that's, please don't go interview the individual. Please don't go try to do an on the spot interview. But if you just can get like any information, description, a vehicle, if they were by a vehicle or you saw them get in or out of a vehicle, a license plates, make, model, if possible. The more information that you can gather to give to us, the better. The location that it was seen helps us, because I will be very honest, with a lot of the tips that we get, they're insanely vague. The tipster is anonymous, which we are perfectly fine with you being an anonymous tipper, but it makes it really, really difficult for us to validate the investigation. And when we have nowhere to go, the tip doesn't really do us any good. So if I get a tip that I saw somebody and they were at the come and go on Northern or whatever, and she looked like she might have been trafficked, but I'm not really sure, but they're not there anymore. And okay, what am I going to do with that? We try.
Imminent danger.
Yeah.
We're not there in time. We're not 911. Best bet is 911.
Yeah. Yeah. So 911, if you see somebody being physically abused, if you see something that's imminent, absolutely call that local law enforcement. We do have those partnerships with the ICAC unit, works out of our office with HSI. So it does get to us. But I mean, we get tips that are months old. By the time it gets filtered to us, at times it's months old. So now we're trying to go backwards and reinvestigate this. And by that time, the person's moved on. They're not there anymore. The trafficker's moved on. You've probably heard, or not, circuits. Traffickers like to work circuits. That means they move from place to place, and they maybe stay here a couple days, there a couple days. And Colorado is one of those transfer locations. So they kind of tend to move through rather than stay here. So sometimes by the time we get it, that person's been gone for weeks. And now we're trying to track down where they could possibly be. And if they're a minor, I mean, obviously that makes it just so much more urgent for us to try to locate that person. And we have no clue where they've gone. So long answer to your question, but don't approach, information gather, call your local law enforcement, give them as much information as you can, and they'll get to us if they feel that we need to be the ones that handle it versus them. So, and then we'll triage it and we'll do the best that we can to move on from there. But it is a longer process for us. It does take a little bit longer because we do have to do that thorough investigation and we have to vet everything. So, any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question, like with younger children, what for?
Behavior-wise, or how to protect against?
Well,
okay, so double-edged answer here. With children, withdrawn, anxiety, drug or alcohol use. When we're talking preteens and teenagers, no offense, young ladies, but they're going to be withdrawn anyways. I'm a mom, my kids are always withdrawn, but abnormally withdrawn or super depressed. I mean, if you're 12 and 13 years old, you should not be like super depressed. You shouldn't be super anxious at that age. Or them pulling back from family, not being as engaged with family if they normally were. And then I would say definitely watch their habits, and their social media is a huge one. social media is a target-rich environment for traffickers. So lots and lots of the tips that we get come off of social media, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Snap. There's stuff I don't even know. Gaming, things like that. So if your child is so engaged with something and they like won't be away from their phone, they won't put it down, they're very protective of it, they're very private, won't speak to you about things, that might be a sign. So proactively, I would say just try to keep super engaged, open communications with your children, kind of try to know their friends, who they're hanging out with. Sometimes I can be a little overbearing. My kids get annoyed at me, but I'm always like, where are you going? Who you at? I got Life 360 on their phone. If they turn it off, they no longer have a phone. I mean, those are some of the things that I do because the environment that I work in makes me probably a little more protective. But I don't know. Does that answer your question? Or okay, sorry, I blabber on sometimes. Anybody else had questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is it possible to go back to the slide that had the list of all the occupations and read them? Because we couldn't.
Oh, you couldn't see them? Okay, sure. We're just gonna go like quick back here. You mean the service industries and stuff?
I don't know. They were just like little black and white thumbnails.
Okay.
I saw one.
This one? Oh, okay. I got you. This one?
Oh, this one.
Okay, so this is just some of the industries that we see being involved with human trafficking. This is recreational facilities. This is like your YMCAs, your swimming pools, your public pools, things like that. Healthcare, forestry and logging, carnivals, big one. Restaurants and food service, that is where we see a ton of our labor trafficking takes place with our restaurant and food services. Traveling sales crew, that is pretty prominent because they go from place to place all the time and they don't have a home base. So pretty prevalent with traveling sales crew.
Would that be more labor?
It could be both. It could be both, or it could be both at the same time, or one and the other, Pornography, obviously, bars, strip clubs, cantinas, remote interactive sexual acts. So this is your social media type stuff, your online, I'm sorry? Yes. I mean, maybe. Depends, age and situation. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Sexting is a big thing among teenagers, but that is not sex trafficking. So that, yeah, right. Yes, yes. Especially if it's with an adult and not like another teenage person. Yes, absolutely. And that's where like your Instagram and your online platforms and the things like that are, that's where they find a lot of them, is through, every teenager. I know my kid like 30 times a day, like, taking all the pictures and posting. I'm like, who wants, like, why? Okay, factories and manufacturing, commercial cleaning services, arts and entertainment, domestic work, that's, like your maid services and things like that, your landscapers, residential, obviously. I don't know what they really mean by residential, but outdoor solicitation, that's your typical person standing on the street. The illicit massage, that's a hot topic. I understand that the massage thing is a hot topic, and health and beauty industries. Illicit activities, clearly, I mean, usually they do tie in with other illicit activities. Landscaping, hotels and hospitality, construction, that's probably more your forced labor stuff. Escort services, they say health and beauty like twice, but apparently that's prominent. Personal sexual servitude, agriculture. I don't know what animal husbandry is, but, and then peddling and begging. They do use a lot of women and children for the sympathy bag and things like that. I mean, I've seen that quite a bit myself. So, and this came from the Polaris Project. This is where, and you can find the Polaris Project online, and they go in, give more information with that. But Yes.
What level is it that becomes something that?
To what level does it have to rise to? So there's not like a number or anything like that. If it's sex trafficking, like obviously that's a federal crime, especially if we can identify a trafficker. So it could just be one person in one instance. I will say it's elevated if it is a juvenile. So I know in Fremont County, I'm very, very close to the treatment center there. And that is one of the industries that concerns me a lot is when you're talking youth treatment centers and you're talking youth detention centers, a large majority of the individuals that we end up interviewing is runaways. That's definitely something, moms and dads, that if your kid runs away, that could be an indicator. But a lot of these detention and youth centers, they run away and they have people picking them up. They've gone through a friend, or they've gone, or they do have access to communications in those centers. They communicate with people outside. They've got somebody waiting to pick them up, and then they're gone. So actually, I think out of the last 4 or 5 tips that I've gotten, it's all been juveniles who have ran away from detention centers in Nebraska. I don't know why Nebraska, but that's for whatever reason. They've all been out of Nebraska detention centers. So that's definitely something that we will look at all of them to answer your question. We'll triage any of them, and other law enforcement, even if we're not going to take it federally, we will still assist and we will still provide information. We have intel analysts that will still do facial recognition, spotlight, traffic jam, all those different things. So we do have access to a lot of services that even if we're not going to take it as a primary, we'll definitely assist. And being in Fremont County, I live in Fremont County, so I'm always happy to pop down and run some intel and just kind of see if there's something that we can help out with. And we do the same with Pueblo, Custer County, Teller County, Monument, all the way out toward the east, which we try to do those remotely. But yeah, we'll look at anything to provide service if it looks like it's a legitimate trafficking situation. So yes, ma'am.
So we talked earlier about, it involves force, fraud, or coercion.
Mm-hmm.
But can you elaborate a little bit more on who they target in terms of vulnerability?
I actually do get that question a lot, and that's not a simple answer to that question. So who do they target? They can target anybody, but anytime there's opportunity to exploit a person, they will take it.
Right.
So if you are mental health status is, you've got depression or some kind of mental health disability, they can exploit that. If you have low self-esteem, they can exploit that. If you have a low social economic status, they can exploit that. If you want to be an actress or an actor, they can exploit that. They fall in love with you, they can exploit that. So there's really not a lot of things that they can't exploit. So if there's opportunity, they'll take it. And I know that does not help a lot, but.
Well, I guess my perception is it tends to be somebody who shows more vulnerability in terms of, like you said, low self-esteem or depression, or needing to, and if it's, traffickers that are trying to groom, they would put, set up parties and look for the
provide drugs and alcohol. Yeah.
Right. Look for the ones who seem to be more vulnerable.
Yeah. So those could be people who are maybe homeless or don't have a stable home, people who are drug dependent, or there's a language barrier, or they don't have family or friends, or they're isolated, alone, things like that. Anytime that they can be your savior and be your helper, and they're going to take you and make you a better you, then they'll definitely exploit that. So yeah, I mean, obviously homelessness and different things like that can be a big contributing factor. So.
One more quick question.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of peers, so you have all these, let's say, I don't know, 5 to 18 or older. So they're going to school.
Mhm.
You know, how do we reach like kids more? Because there's probably a lot of kids that can be aware of other kids, their friends, and
Mhm.
notice differences with their friends, and how. I don't know what the best way. You know, TV's probably not the best way. To
Right,
get to them,
no.
but social media or doing more talks at schools.
Yeah, so Blue Campaign actually has tried to reach out into more of the giving presentations to school campuses, and they do have a presentation much like this, but it's sanitized for schools, and they do have a separate presentation for school-age children, but I think it's for the little bit older ages, maybe like 10 to above. But yeah, I mean, we are trying to reach out to that. I think that's why we try to get more information out to the parents. I know that parents don't have as much influence on their kids as friends do a lot of times, but that's also why we try to get with educators, your teachers, your school counselors, your school resource officers, those type of people who still have the eyes and the ears in that environment. So, but Blue Campaign does have a presentation that they give at schools. I haven't done a presentation at schools, but we are trying to get the information at least out to the educators.
Shared Hope International has three different programs for public school, homeschool,
Okay.
and those are available for if a school or a teacher, I think it's like $100, and then they have free access to it.
Okay.
And so they can use it. They don't have to plan a speaker. You can do it in your class. You can, do it group setting. So it's a video.
Okay.
There are resources out there so that, because I think the task force has had a lot of trouble getting into schools. And a lot of teachers say, look, we've got so many things we've got to teach and everything, but there are some resources that, someone motivated they can take with it.
Right.
Has gotten into some of those.
With the superintendent's when she puts together the highlights to there is a problem. I wanted to, I don't know who does it, but the posters and the stops along highways in Colorado.
Yeah, that's part of the Blue Campaign that puts those out.
If they change that periodically, and if they could somehow put on their removable phone number.
So we actually had an NGO agency, which I thought was brilliant. And it was one of those scan codes, like with your phone. I'm not like a tech. I mean, I know the things I need to know, but I'm not like super technical. But there's just that, and it's nothing. It's just a QR code, like on one of those posters. And if they just scan it, it'll take them to a link or to a phone number or something like that, so that they're not walking around with a piece of paper or anything that's revealing that this is something that that they've got in their possession. Another NGO came in when we did we do some proactive things to try to identify victims, and I won't get into the details, but I will tell you that we do a lot of proactive stuff where we come face to face with a lot of people that we think might be trafficked victims. And we have NGOs available. We also have victim survivors available. And one other thing that they did is they made lip balms in the little canisters. And on the bottom of that canister is that same QR code, that if they ever did want to reach back out or they found themselves in a dangerous situation, that they could scan that QR code and have that phone number or that link hit that website or however. Those are some of the ways that we're trying to discreetly get information out there, but this is obviously a work in progress for all of us. So the one thing I do want to say is that it's those external individuals like yourselves that help us. I mean, we can't fight this battle on our own, and we certainly don't have the resources, and we don't have the eyes and ears that the community has. So when we can team up and work together, it actually makes a huge difference for us. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that it can be quite a while before you can work a tip. And because of the process, that brings to my mind the fact that I've seen federal numbers, I've seen state numbers, I've seen the E3 text. You know, what are you saying is the best way? Should I be using a state number? Should I be using a federal number? Just for tips or information? And I've seen different numbers.
Right.
Just frankly, not sure what's the best.
Completely understand. Me personally, I don't like to memorize a whole bunch of different stuff. I like this one, the HSI tip line, because even if we don't hit it, we contact somebody who can. So if we're not able to work it, we'll call that local authority, the state and local authority. This HSI tip line, that's what we work off of. And a lot of our state and locals, they send the stuff to this one. So that's the one I prefer. Or again, the Blue Campaign for educational stuff. But if it's an actual tip or something that you think is actually going on, this is the one that we monitor. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I see, and I don't know, I watch this family, I see the family present on a regular basis, and they present as being a family. I often wonder if they are, because you have the dad figure, the mother figure, and you have the young children, and they're peddling and begging. Is that, what is the status that parents do that with their kids? And I worry about things like, it's cold outside, you know, are they hungry? Is it, you report something like that when you see it?
I say report anything that you find to be suspicious. It is better to report than it is to not, than to walk around and be like, that might have been something, and I'm really not sure. I would prefer to go out and check into something and triage that and find out that it was nothing, than I would walk away from something that potentially was something. So in that situation, I would contact the local law enforcement, because they do have individuals who do like welfare checks and things like that. I mean, obviously they could go out and be like, hey, it's cold and your kid isn't wearing a coat. Can we at least take you to a place that's warm or get you a jacket or something to that effect? I mean, and as people, what's stopping us from stopping and giving somebody a jacket or a blanket or offering something, you know? So.
And my attention, I wasn't present when this happened. My father, again, it's somebody that's pretty regular in the area. And my father offered them food. He said, you know what? The guy was wanting money. And my dad says, can I buy some meals for the kids? The man lost his temper on my father.
See, and that's where you really are like, okay, you know, is this a money driven thing? Is this, you know, are they really needy? Before law enforcement, long time ago, I had a situation. I'm an animal lover, so like kids and animals, those are my thing, like break my heart. So I am driving down a street in Denver and I see this guy with this puppy, right? And I'm like, okay, you're an adult person, you're on your own, but the dog, you know. So I stop and I'm like, well, do you have a place to live with this dog? I mean, it's cold outside, and you know, and this and that, and like, I really just want to feed your dog. He was super irritated and angry at me that I wanted to feed the dog something rather than give him money. And I was like, okay, well then I guess you're getting nothing from me, because that's the way that I am. But yeah, I mean, I see that, and the homeless population lately is really gotten extreme, in my opinion, and I do see more of that, kids and families and type of situations, and sometimes that's just a personal call. I mean, do you call the authorities? They're out there, they're seeing it, they've probably actually interacted with this family on multiple times, but hey, it doesn't hurt to call and give them a heads up. Anything else? Yes, ma'am.
I happened to catch just a little bit of a movie that came on TV once called either
Trafficked.
And I was so disturbed. I was like, I can't watch this. But what little I saw, like how much of that was written and how much of that was accurate.
I mean, I haven't actually watched it. I'll be completely honest with you. When you deal with something in real life, you don't particularly care to watch it on TV. So I don't watch cops and I don't watch, FBI files or any of that stuff. But I mean, honestly, I don't know. Everything has a TV aspect to it. But if you have somebody out there and they're making these like PBS type videos and these things like that, I mean, usually that's pretty close to true, at least their story is. And if that person, I mean, I don't know, I haven't watched the show, so yeah. So I think
I think it was just all drama.
okay, yeah, don't know, don't watch those things, but
Carrie was it. I remember that. And what freaked me out was that the two things that I saw. One was there was a person that was being trafficked that somehow slipped her phone and her purse in a restroom. And so they then went after her as like somebody else to pick up the traffic. And then also, like, when they thought the police were rescuing her, they were actually calling her a product, and they were in on it. And I was like, I can't watch.
wow,
this.
okay. Yeah, way to go, TV. Don't know the answer to that question. I mean, I can't say stuff like that doesn't happen. I can tell you with us, it doesn't, or at least not me and not my partner. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't watch those shows. I get angry when I watch things like that. So, I can't really answer that question for you. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Anything
for
else?
Your time. And
okay, thank you. I do have a few business cards over here. I wasn't really sure who or what I would be presenting to tonight. And so I do have some cards. If you do need my contact information or would like it for some reason, feel free to email me, call me, text me, and I'll answer any questions that come up maybe later down the road. Thank you all for having me. I appreciate it. It's great to meet you all, and thank you for the work that you do.
Thanks for the work you do.
Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us this evening. That wraps up our meeting for January. We hope to see you in February.
Hey, Leona, can you
Yeah.
talk briefly about the Colorado hotline? Because you volunteer there, so you know how much it's.
Yes, and I'm not sure, when you say how much it's monitored, I'm not sure. It is a 24/7 hotline, the Colorado Human Trafficking Hotline, which I can give you the number. I don't have it on the screen. But it is a 24/7 hotline here in Colorado, and which has partnerships with many of the law enforcement jurisdictions in the various counties. So I definitely recommend that. It also has a text line that is not a 24/7. That is a noon to midnight. Let me give you the number. I don't have it memorized, but I can tell you.
The number is 1-888-827-3788.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually the national hotline. So that's the National Human Trafficking Hotline. If you're looking for the Colorado one, yes, thank you.
866-455-5075.
And the text line is 720-999-9724.